Good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday from Awesemo.com. This is CFB DFS live before lock presented by Prize Picks. I am Ben Raza, joined as I am each and every week by Matt Gajeski. We've got 12 more games to break down, a ton of things to talk about from the betting side, from the DFS side, from all angles. Matt, how are you feeling this morning?
I'm feeling great. It's a crazy day for me. Immediately after this stream, I am hightailing it up north to my hometown. One of my good friends from back home is getting married today. I do not condone September, October weddings, November weddings. I am firmly against them. So it's going to be a crazy day for me, but I'm excited for some college football.
You did this once before, did you not this year?
I did do it once this year. I had a wedding early in September during Notre Dame's first game. I was not happy about that. And now we're going to miss the Red River rivalry driving up north. But luckily, it's in my hometown, so my parents still live there. And my dad and my brother are like exactly like me. So the Gajeski household on college football Saturdays, NFL Sundays, it's like a live betting football extravaganza. So that'll be fun.
No doubt about it. Well, before you hightail up, we're going to get all the information from you to determine this slate. We got a million guys injured. We'll see what we can find during the show. Chat, good to have you all in here. But I do want to talk about, as I start every show with, most important thing, Prize Picks is a great avenue. They're offering those daily prop-based contests. And if you haven't been over there, they're going to get you started with a really nice deposit bonus. And if you're unfamiliar with it, you're looking at picking players. So you're going to pick 2, 3, 4, or 5 players, and you're going to just project, are they going over or under the totals that are listed? If you correctly pick, say, 5, you're going to get upwards of 10x that entry. They've got college football, the NFL, of course, NBA when it comes soon enough, baseball still. So no reason to not get over there. Download the app in the App Store or on Google Play. Make that first deposit using the promo code Awesemo. You get an instant first match deposit bonus of up to $100. We'll be talking about them throughout the show, but I got a couple right off the bat that I want to throw by you. The first one is Tion Evans over 78.5 rushing yards. I like that even if small plays, but if small sits, this seems like the lock of all locks.
Yeah, it's appropriately priced for small playing, and small is very questionable coming into this game. So I think you already have some positive value, and then you just have a fantastic out where if Smalls doesn't play in this game, there's a huge path to a ceiling there.
No doubt about it. And then I went, we're going to talk about this game in full soon enough. I'm going with Marvin Mims over 3 catches. I know that Lincoln Riley seems determined to not let this cash, but this is it, man. It's all hands on deck. He had 4 for 71 against Kansas State. I think he will be more involved today.
Sure hope so.
He better be for my Oklahoma tickets.
He hasn't really eclipsed 50% of the routes. So that it's very concerning, but he still is their most efficient player by all metrics. I have 2, one that I really like. Let's go to the MAC, not on the slate, but Dustin Crum is projected for 194.5 passing yards against Buffalo's defense. That is one I'm just smashing. They're on the night slate on DraftKings, so it's a game I projected. Crum is projected for like 250 passing yards as his median. It's a high volume offense. They're one of the fastest teams in the country. Love Dustin Crum, a veteran quarterback against a weak Buffalo secondary.
That's a good one. I bet Kent State today. Inside a touchdown, baby. Let's go. Just like Western Michigan last week, we're picking on Buffalo. That's what this show does. Any others that you have here on the Prize Picks? And we'll touch upon them throughout the games as well.
I think Rattler should be a little bit higher. He's at 259.5. He projects for around 280 for me. That's a back and forth affair we're projecting between Oklahoma and Texas. The total is above 60. Don't like that one quite as much, but it's still one I think there's value on.
No doubt. There's definitely some of these under the radar games worth getting into. You mentioned that I love that Kent State one. That is a real good one. And we'll get the injury news. You can take advantage, but let's dive in. First game up, South Carolina and Tennessee. It's a 10.5 point spread is what I see. Game should be a lot of points. What we've seen from Heupel and this Tennessee squad, a lot of points up and down the field. So talk to me. Let's start with South Carolina though. A lot of injuries. Their quarterback's been banged up. They've had 2 of them at times. What's the state of this team heading into this game?
Yeah, they're really banged up. They're banged up in their secondary. They have, I believe, one of their safeties. He's going to be out for the first half with a targeting from last week. So that just sets up for Tennessee to move the ball even better than they did. The one main mismatch South Carolina will have is their defensive line. They have a great pass rush, but I think that's somewhat mitigated by Tennessee having a dual threat quarterback running a lot of plays per game. On the South Carolina side, Doty's not much of an option. He's super cheap and the game environment's decent, but South Carolina still is a pretty low implied team total overall, just north of 23 points. And you don't really have a clear pecking order among receivers. It's Josh Vann, who does lead the team with 68 yards per game, but he's done that with pure efficiency. So I'm a little bit worried with him. And then Jalen Brooks, DeKirian Joyner, they're kind of low upside options. It's a hard place to stack. And in the backfield, Kevin Harris has kind of reasserted himself as the lead back, but they have Marshawn Lloyd and Juju McDowell siphoning off a few carries here and there. And what that really does is prevent Kevin Harris from having that immense workload we like. So South Carolina is a little difficult to get for me.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, you look at South Carolina, A, I think they'll be playing from behind. B, Tennessee's run defense actually hasn't been terrible at all this year. 34th in rushing yards allowed per attempt so far this year. They run so many plays. That's the best thing from this game. Tennessee wants to play fast. I think they found some stability with Hooker. So let's start. We're going to have to play the if game a little bit. Talk to me about Evans if Small sits, and then talk to me about Evans if Small ends up being active.
Evans is a little expensive on DraftKings specifically, and you're going to need Small to sit for him to pay off that price, I think, just because he's expensive and you have to make some concessions if you play Evans. There's a lot of good backs on today's slate. If Smalls plays, he's a really interesting player at 4K flat because he's been basically involved in a 50-50 timeshare. I think you can expect this to move Evans' way a little bit. He's just been super efficient. He's averaging 94 rushing yards per game on just 16 touches. So I do think Evans is live in GPPs. This is a team with a high total, 34 points implied. That's something you definitely like. And they have a very high run rate. Part of that because Hendon Hooker is going to take a lot of that on the ground too, but I like him in GPPs.
Anything on the outside with Jones or Tillman, or are you saying, you know what, Tennessee's probably going to be running the ball a lot, I'll just stick to the ground game?
You can stack Hooker for sure. They run so many plays that even though they have a 38% pass rate, they have a decent amount of opportunities in the pass game too. They had a changing of the guard kind of in the wide receiver room last week. Velus Jones, who had not eclipsed 42% of the routes in any game, immediately pops up for 82% in the week I was just on the full Velus Jones fade. So he's a full-time player in the offense now. He's averaging 5.3 targets per game over the last 4 games. And in the last 2, he's seen 6 and 8. So Velus is your premier stacking option. From there, Cedric Tillman, 6 targets last week. He's 4K. Javonte Payton's also involved. Those are your 3 full-time receivers, but Velus has to be the preferred option.
No doubt about it. And I was really impressed with Tennessee. They hung 62 points on Missouri, who's no juggernaut, but still a decent middle of the road team. I think they're probably just as good as South Carolina, and that was on the road. So I like it. I did use Tennessee. I rarely bet teasers, but I have them in my teasers. I think it's a pretty good number. I feel pretty confident they win the game. Not messing around with 10.5 though. Anything else in this game you want to keep it moving?
I grabbed it at 10, so luckily I don't have that hook on it.
Yeah, I couldn't find 10. I should have just waited.
I do like 90% of my bets on Monday and Sunday nights. I just hit them really early and then just ignore them through the week unless there's news.
No doubt about it. All right. And I mentioned I like the over for Evans on Prize Picks. Moving on, Red River, whatever they call it, showdown rivalry. It doesn't matter. Oklahoma and Texas. Oklahoma's the 3-point favorite. Over under of 64. Listen, we've talked about Oklahoma extensively on this show. They are undefeated, and that is the only positive thing that you can say about this team, because if you throw out Western Carolina, who isn't a real team, the other 4, they have not covered. They have not looked good. It's been single-digit wins, and Texas is by far the best opponent that Oklahoma has played so far. So what do you do with this team? I still believe, and we're going to get there, but do you see an emergence from someone? Where does Rattler rank? How do you break down the Sooners?
So we just got news about some of these injuries. It literally came through. Delarian Turner-Yell is active. I know that is not fantasy viable information, but I know you were looking for that. So Delarian Turner-Yell is coming back. Some of the other guys we talked about before show, they were not mentioned in this, so we'll have to see. But Oklahoma has definitely not lived up to expectation, which is a little bit interesting. They've stalled in some spots, and Rattler's efficiency metrics are actually pretty solid. He has a 76% completion percentage, 7.9 yards per attempt. All that's fine. He hasn't eclipsed 300 yards since he played Tulane in week 1, but Rattler also has some mobility. So I think it's a spot where you can potentially buy low on him in some stacks. The hardest part about Rattler in stacks is figuring out who his pass catchers are going to be. They have not really used a consistent rotation at receiver. The only player that has been out there consistently is Jaden Hazelwood, and he's very cheap. So I think he's the best stacking option just because he's going to be on the field. Mims has by far been the most efficient receiver, and he's also cheap. But again, he has to get there on like a 50% snap share, which is really difficult. Just not the biggest ceiling unless he catches like 2 long bombs or something like that. And behind them, I mean, it's a complete disaster. Michael Woods, Mayan Williams, Jeremiah Hall, Austin Stogner, Drake Stoops, and Braden Willis are all going to play somewhere between 30 and 50% of the snaps. Just a complete mess.
What do you make of the backfield? Because maybe it was one game, maybe it was a blip on the radar. Brooks in the last game against Kansas State really started to get it going. He had 15 carries in that game, while Eric Gray just had 4 attempts for 22 yards. Do you think that indicates a real shift, or is this just a back and forth situation?
I think it could give you a little more confidence in Brooks, but at the same time, he still doesn't have a single target on the year. So and Gray does. And it's not like they've been down a lot in games. They have been in some competitive spots, but what happens, it looks like Gray is the preferred pass catching back. I'm expecting close to a 50-50 timeshare. Maybe Brooks somewhat edges Gray, but it'll be close here. I love targeting these kind of backfields and shootouts, and I've done so with Oklahoma. We've done it with a lot of the good teams like Clemson, Ohio State, to some success, mainly with Henderson for Ohio State. Oklahoma hasn't hit yet, but it's a really strong offensive line. The best matchup in the game is against Texas up front. I think it's a spot where you can roll the dice on these guys in GPPs, large field, hopefully.
Last question, then we'll move to Texas. Do you think there's any chance that Marcus Major gets any sizable workload here?
No, he wasn't really getting a workload at any point in his career outside of injuries.
He's got a cool name.
He does. I think he's a distant RB3.
On the other side, Texas, they had it was more than a blip. They were dismantled by Arkansas. They have recovered nicely, 58 points against Rice, 70 against Texas Tech. Good win against TCU on the road, and that was all Bijan Robinson. But Casey Thompson runs this offense. He's got some dual threat ability. What do you see from him today? Or do you think that just the volume in terms of passing attempts isn't there where we need it to be?
He's shown a ceiling. He had over 300 yards in week 4. Last week, credit to Steve Sarkisian. He just rode the run game, which was working phenomenally against TCU, and they won that game. They won it by 5 points. It was close throughout, but he exploited the advantages. If Oklahoma gets up in this game, I think it's a situation where Thompson might be forced into throwing. Not to mention Oklahoma's strength has been up front on the defensive line. They do have some injuries, and I'm still waiting for clarity on those. Haven't seen word on some of these questionable players yet. But if active, that is going to be the strength of the Oklahoma defense. Bijan is at a really expensive price point now, and you have to make significant concessions to get him in your lineup. There's maybe running backs that have 90% of his workload, $3K cheaper, which I'm more than comfortable taking that build rather than jamming in Bijan on purpose. But in GPPs, he certainly has a ceiling.
Yeah, we saw them. Sarkisian was willing to just ride him to the end there. And if Oklahoma's front is a little thin today, as an Oklahoma backer, that's my biggest concern. On the outside, where do you put guys like Worthy or Whittington? Can you go to them in Thompson in a stack and run it back? Are they one-offs? How do you break down the pass catchers?
Yeah, you can definitely stack Texas. And if you're stacking them, you're hoping they're probably down in the game. But they have a very clear target distribution with Whittington at the top. He's going to play in the slot, so he's not used downfield as much. Xavier Worthy, his stats are a little boosted by like that broken play they had against Texas Tech where he broke like 14 tackles and then had a 70-yard score, but he's viable. And then Joshua Moore, he was banged up to start the year, but he is functioning as that pure wide receiver 3, not targeted a ton, but that's reflected in his price. They're all affordable. So in that game script, I think this is a spot for GPPs that is actually pretty solid. There's like 5 teams, 6 teams that are going to have really condensed ownership. And Texas is in a solid game environment, and they do not project to have it. So Casey Thompson stacks, I think, are contrarian enough to get in some of your lineups.
Can you join me on the Titanic ship here that is Oklahoma today? I'm going down. If they lose, they lose. I'm backing -3. Already bet it.
I'm waiting for these injury news.
I'm scared. Yell playing makes me obviously a lot more secure for the secondary, but I really hope up front. The one thing Oklahoma's done really well, that D-line is going to whip Texas up front. They're a really strong unit, and I do trust them, but that's a big concern if they're missing some guys.
Agreed. Texas is a middling offensive line as far as like pass protection and stuff. So if Oklahoma were to get up in the game, and pressure Texas, I think it would be difficult, a tough matchup for them.
I think I've said this basically every week. I think this is the week where Oklahoma kind of shows that they belong in that conversation. And we will see soon enough. The game is at noon. All right.
I'm 0-4 betting them.
Yes, that's true. And we couldn't bet them against Western Carolina. So today's the day, hopefully. Arkansas +5 going into Ole Miss, 66.5-point total. So this is a healthy one. I don't think anyone would be surprised to see a lot of points here. Let's start with KJ Jefferson. Him, like everybody else, looked like they were playing an NFL team when they went into Athens. Nobody can score on Georgia. I do want to kind of ask you, do you just throw that out? Because outside of that, at times he's looked very effective with his dual threat ability.
Yeah, he's been solid in every game so far this year. A lot of it does come from his ability on the ground. Very strong dual threat. He's not shown a ton as a passer. He's not even completing 60% of his passes, but he does have a solid yards per attempt is at 10. So he's throwing the ball downfield with some frequency, and that's benefited players like Traylon Burks. But really, Jefferson's viable to some degree based on his legs. I don't love his price point, but you can certainly get there. It's the wrong side of a really good game environment. So I think people won't get to him as much. And Arkansas does have a 30 implied team total. He's really easy to stack too. Traylon Burks is super affordable this week. Definitely saw his price drop a little bit after the game against Georgia. Even if he doesn't put up super efficient numbers, he has a 37.5% target share. So volume is going to get Traylon Burks there. I like him in stacks of this game.
Is it a skinny stack though, or is there a second pass catcher that you can put with him?
Tyson Morris has been the wide receiver too, but just the drop in targets all the way down from Burks to Tyson Morris is drastic. It's 36 targets for Burks, 9 for Morris.
Yeah, so it seems like a skinny stack. Where does Traylon Smith, who leads this backfield, come in? Is it more of a timeshare at this point? If they fall behind, will they abandon the run? Where does he fall? 5,300, 6,800 on FanDuel.
Yeah, it is a timeshare. And the only game he's seen a ceiling came against Texas A&M, and I was hard fading Traylon Smith that game, but he ends up with 17 carries. Interestingly, the timeshare was still there. Like KJ Jefferson had 8 carries, Raheem Sanders 6 carries, Dominique Johnson 6 carries, AJ Green 3 carries. That's 15 carries for the backup running backs. It's not going to be one individual player that takes the work from Traylon Smith, but he does seed enough work to these backs, and they use 4 of them where he's a little bit difficult to trust. But again, really good game environment. If you want to take a stab on Smith in GPPs, I think it's fine. He's shown a ceiling as a pass catcher last year. This year, he only has 2 targets, which is concerning.
And it's a good pace up spot for the offense as a whole, because on the other side, we get Ole Miss Rebels, Matt Corral leading this team. It's just been ridiculous offense at times. Bama's Bama. Obviously, they did not have it. That game had a lot of problems from the start, starting with Mingo breaking his foot. Let's start with the injury. A lot of people have already asked. As far as I know, Ely, we just don't know yet.
We don't know yet. We should get that news soon. They're playing in the first slate of games.
So first, before we get there, let's start with Matt Corral. There's a lot of premier signal callers on the slate. He's, 10K, 11,300 over on FanDuel. Is he the top option? Is he amongst them? How do you rate him when you look at the slate and all the good QBs we have?
Jaron Ely's not warming up.
Well, and it's a head injury, is it not?
It's a concussion.
Yeah, so it's pretty binary. Okay.
So anyway, to your question first, we can get to the backfield in a second, but Jaron Ely looks like he's out. Matt Corral doesn't project as well this week. Their team total, instead of being in the 40s, is down at 36 points. And they have a pretty high run rate. Even in the game against Alabama, they didn't eclipse a 50% pass share. So they're just passing 42.5% of the time. When the play volume drops a little bit against a team like Arkansas, it hurts Corral's projection, and he's super, super expensive. So at the top, you have to make some concessions. Would you rather play Corral or Armstrong or Stroud? And Corral, I think he ends up being a player that you can leave out in cash game builds for some of these other guys. But in tournaments, he definitely has a ceiling. We saw Alabama exploit these deficiencies on the Ole Miss side. Hopefully Arkansas can do the same and keep this like a back and forth affair, which would be great for Corral. He's pretty easy to stack now too, with Jonathan Mingo out. Drummond is the alpha. He's going to continue to be so, averaging just shy of 100 yards per game. Braylon Sanders should see an uptick in volume. Didn't really happen against Alabama, but again, they just got boat raced in that game. And then we were trying to predict the wide receiver 3 last week, and we thought it could go a couple ways. It did go the way that Chalk thought, with Jaden Jackson just coming in and playing that wide receiver 3 role. I personally thought they might move Drummond out of the slot to the wide alignment and put Pearson in the slot, but they did not do that. They used Jaden Jackson basically as the 1-for-1 replacement. So he's the cheap option, I think, that you can stack with Corral here or use as a run back if you're stacking the Arkansas side.
Real good game environment, 66.5 point total. Did you bet this game?
No.
Neither did I. Stay away. I have no idea how good Arkansas is. And look at that. Friend of the show, Blaine, the Oregon State fan himself. What are you all vibing with? Little Toad shout out. Good for him. Where does this Mississippi State, Ole Miss stack rank amongst, I know we haven't got to Ohio State and some of these other ones, but you think just price points a little drastic?
If you're running the stack, I'm okay with it because you can get some really cheap receivers. So the price of the stack isn't drastic. So if you're running like a Corral, Sanders, and a Jackson stack, that's going to be cheaper than like a Stroud, Olave, Wilson stack. So I'm still okay with it.
Anything else from this game before we move on? One of the better ones, obviously, if you're looking to stack this one, you're in a pretty good spot, I think.
You have two extremely cheap running backs in Parish and Connor. Love them now in tournaments. They're fantastic plays. And considering Parish and cash, he's been the most efficient back for this team. He's the clear pass catcher. Snoop Connor does not function as much in that role. Connor is the bigger back, and they'll use him a lot around the goal line. But both of these guys are below 5K and phenomenal plays. Normally, we don't get to an Ole Miss back just because they use 3 of them. But now when it's condensed to 2, these guys have enormous upside. So love Parish, love Connor, prefer Parish if picking one.
Is Parish cash viable?
Yeah, he's in my cash lineup right now, which is not settled. I don't know what I'm going to do yet.
Fair enough.
I'm playing around with the late news.
Okay. We respect that.
But Parish allows you to do some pretty cool things.
You're a multitasker.
Yeah, man. Late news. This is our first real late news CFB slate. We're
going to put you to the test. We got West Virginia and Baylor. This will give you a little reprieve, not nearly as much to talk about with these teams. Baylor's a 2.5 point favorite, but 44 point total. That kind of shows you where we're at here. Let's start with West Virginia. We've seen them a lot. You've got a situation. You've got Letty Brown on that backfield. That's what they want to do. Every time I bring it up, I make fun of their quarterback. That's going to hold strong still, Matt. Doji he really is not mobile. He really can't do much. So talk to me about it. Is it as simple as just Letty Brown or pass, or are there other guys we should consider?
Yeah, I think that's it entirely. It's a spot where it's a really low total overall, 44 points, slow pace. Both these teams have been crawling this year. And Dogie, whoever you say his name, he's just going to take so many sacks that he needs the volume in order to pay off his salary, even as cheap as he is. He's also hard to stack. You have 2 clear players that are kind of working ahead in Winston Wright and Bryce Ford Wheaton, but Sam James, Isaiah Ezell, and Sean Ryan are all splitting time. Pretty tough to get to any of the West Virginia side. Letty Brown is in play based purely on his volume. In the last 2 games, he hasn't ceded a single carry to another running back in the offense. So he's going to see 100% of the work in competitive games, active as a pass catcher. You just hope there's some better efficiency. West Virginia's offensive line's been brutal.
On the other side, I don't really know what to make of this team with Baylor, honestly. Very methodical, not explosive. Bohannon is serviceable, 6,100. Let's just start here. Is he even in play? He's got a little mobility. He's not of 0, certainly in the rushing side. Where does he go? Is he a possible pay down option at QB?
I think if you're in this range, you probably just play Tagovailoa. Bohannon would need like an anomaly rushing game to get there because he's only averaging 23 attempts per game. And even in competitive spots that hasn't drastically risen, they're just so slow, so run heavy, not even passing 40% of the time. Really hard to play Bohannon. But if you do, for whatever reason, in the big tournaments, he's pretty easy to stack. Tyquan Thornton and RJ Sneed are the 1-2 punch for that receiving room. And recently, Drew Estrada has been working ahead of Josh Fleeks, but I don't think you need to go there. There's other contrarian spots, I think, that are viable and not as risky as Baylor.
Anything between Smith and Ebner in the backfield?
I'm probably playing Ebner over Smith based on price. They have nearly a 50-50 timeshare, 72 opportunities for Smith, 69 for Ebner, and Ebner has more in the pass game. Smith has been way more efficient, but again, really low total. There's a lot of opportunity costs with these guys. Like Ebner, he's 100 cheaper now than Henry Parish. That's not something I'm not going to pivot to Ebner there. So it's kind of just an opportunity cost thing where I'm not getting Baylor.
Did you bet this game?
No, I did not.
Neither did I. I do lean to Baylor at home, but again, I think Iowa State is so fraudulent that their quality win there maybe isn't even quality. So
fraudulent.
So fraudulent. Who would have thunk it? One of us would have thunk it. One of us didn't understand. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Maryland, Ohio State. Maryland is a 3-touchdown dog going into the shoe, 71-point total. So this is a game we can't just ignore by any stretch. All right. First question up, one of the easiest. We know Raheem Jarrett's in an amazing spot because Demas has gone down. A, is he cash viable? B, is he teetering on like a lock situation in cash? Where do you look at this $4,100 price tag for Maryland's new alpha receiver?
Yeah, he's one of the best options in cash we have. And people are trying to like talk me out of Raheem Jarrett saying, oh, Maryland's been just getting boat raced. They're going to be down. What happens in this game? I mean, it's a 72-point total. Maryland is a 21-point underdog, but in a 72-point total, they're still projected for 25.25 points. That's over 3 touchdowns. Like they're still projected to move the ball a little bit against Ohio State. Demas was their pure alpha, like a 20% target share, 500 yards receiving already. That volume has to go somewhere. And Maryland, I think we can expect a step back in efficiency, of course, but the volume that Jarrett received should more than make up for that. And it's not like he's 6K. He's 4,100 on DraftKings. He can very easily pay off this price, even in like a floor situation for Maryland.
Does Jayshon Jones now get a bump up 3,500? Is he going to slide into a new role, or is he still going to be amongst other pass catchers that will kind of fill the void? Because they're going to have to be throwing. Tagovailoa is going to take some chances. Where does he come in considering, again, the loss of Demas?
Yeah, he should immediately step up into a full-time role. He'd been rotating somewhat, but I think you can definitely get to him. He's just like, he's not that much cheaper than Jarrett. So I feel like you just go and take Jarrett if possible. But if you really can't get there, Jayshon Jones, I think, is someone you can get to.
Do you have any interest in taking Tagovailoa with Jarrett and Jones?
Tagovailoa projects the best among the cheap quarterbacks. I don't think you necessarily need to get there. In my cash games, I'm going to be paying up for 2 quarterbacks rather than going down to Tagovailoa, but he's definitely viable. He projects well based on the total of the game.
Anything with Tayon Fleet-Davis? I know he can catch the ball a little bit, or is it just not enough opportunities on the ground when they're clearly going to be behind?
Yeah, it's exactly that.
On the other side, Ohio State, really, they have no margin for error now. They're starting to find their groove. Maybe it's a product that they played Rutgers and Akron, but honestly, going to Rutgers and winning by 39 points is somewhat impressive. And this offense is just unstoppable. So talk to me about Stroud, Olave, Wilson, Henderson. I mean, it's just ridiculous how many weapons they have.
Yeah, this is a game you definitely want pieces of. An enormous team total. So whatever you do, play something in this game, unless you're just fading for GPPs. That's the only reason you would. Stroud, clearly stackable, easy to stack with 2, 3 weapons that are getting all of the volume. Garrett Wilson's underpriced. He's actually cheaper than Olave on both platforms, egregiously. He has 8 more targets. He's averaging 92.4 receiving yards per game to Olave 74.8. Again, that probably normalizes and these guys get close to a 50-50 split by the end of the year, but they should be identical in price, not one of them significantly cheaper. And then Jackson Smith-Njigba has actually been used as the wide receiver 3, at least 6 targets in 3 of his last 4 games. He's now averaging 69.8 receiving yards per game. So if you need a cheaper option, Smith-Njigba is definitely viable. Jeremy Ruckert is somewhat viable. He's playing on a majority of the snaps, but he's basically just a touchdown or bust tight end. So all 4 of those players stackable with Stroud. Definitely use that or hit the backfield. Mayan Williams is out for this game. That means it's going to be a somewhat timeshare between Trevion Henderson and Master Teague. In competitive games, they showed a willingness to ride Henderson more. So I do think there's a little bit of untapped potential with him to see a full workload if the game remains close. If it does not, and we saw this last week, Master Teague popped up for 10 carries. He's 4.2K, and he's viable in this game script because you have Ohio State as a 21-point favorite. You can play Henderson or Teague with pretty confident, I think with a lot of confidence today.
No doubt. I actually like Ohio State in the game to cover the number. It just seems like they've started to find a groove. It feels like they're going to score north of 50. If Maryland could put up 30 points, so be it. I'm going to lay those points. A couple questions. Hooker, Parish, or Schrader attack. You always want to play 2 QBs. I would assume you would agree. Anytime you have a question, if there's 2 QBs on one side, play that side.
Yes.
Travion or Algier for BYU? We'll get to BYU, but what do you think about that one?
Trevion.
Okay. Yeah, this is
It's
just
close,
such a.
though. I mean, you're taking a little bit of a risk with Trevion. Algiers' volume is consistent, but I still think Trevion projects a lot better with his role.
No doubt about it. We're going to keep it moving. Before, though, as usual, I say this every week, but I mean it. It is so exciting to see so many people tuning in each and every week. If you have not joined our channel, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button as well. We really do appreciate that. And if you are looking for college football betting content or just betting content in general, if you haven't checked out Awesemo Odds, our new YouTube channel, make sure you go over there. Me and Matt doing a lot of work, quick, easy videos, VODs, a lot of picks, a lot of fun, and as well as our exclusive podcast, Betting You, available anywhere you listen and download podcasts. So check all that out. We're doing a ton of work on the college football scene, and we're having so much fun doing it. So we appreciate you guys doing that. All right, let's keep it going. Michigan State, this feels a little trappy. This line is dropping. It's down to 4.5. They still are favorite. Going to Rutgers, 49.5 point total. I believe one of the injury news, and Matt, you can confirm it. I've seen a couple of things in chat that Bo Melton is going to be out today. If that is the case, that's a blow for Rutgers. But let's start with Michigan State. They have been getting it done all year. Kenneth Walker, the alpha's on the outside. What do you anticipate their attack is against this Rutgers defense?
I think, man, it's going to, I think, be a slow, run-heavy game script. And Michigan State has shown a willingness to do this. They've just ridden Kenneth Walker right into the ground. He's been super efficient, 136 rushing yards per game. Michigan State's much run heavier this year. They haven't really been in as many competitive games, but I do think they will return to the pass in competitive spots. I'm a little confused by this line. I'm not sure why it's moving in Rutgers' favor. So Kenneth Walker, I think, is somebody you can certainly consider in cash games, viable in tournaments. There's just a massive ceiling with him.
I originally was looking to possibly bet Michigan State. I have come off that. I'm just going to pass. I'm not going to bet Rutgers. I think I missed it. It was upwards a little bit of a better number, and I'm just a little confused. I do like Michigan State. They've been impressive. You know, that win against Nebraska, it wasn't the most impressive. Nebraska's a good team, and they're going to give Michigan all they can handle and then some today. But this just doesn't have a great environment from the DFS side, 49.5 point total. And then on the other side, Matt, if, and it seems that this is the case, that Bo Melton is out, where does this leave the Rutgers offense?
In shambles?
That's really the correct answer, yeah.
I mean, Aaron Cruikshank's going to see a larger workload for sure. And then from there, I still think it's kind of a mess, but Shameen Jones should be the wide receiver 2. And then you'll have a split between Brandon Sanders, Isaiah Washington as the wide receiver 3. But I mean, like, they're not cheap enough. They're like, Aaron Cruikshank's more expensive than Rakeem Jarrett.
Well, that's just insane. And I assume you feel the same way to an extent with Vidrell. Like, if you were going to play him, there are just other quarterbacks in that same price range that you would have ahead of him. Yeah, no doubt. Even honestly, I'd rather play, not that I think you should play Bohannon, but I'd even rather play him.
Me too.
So there's just not a lot of places to go here. Anything else really from either side? Feel free to recap. I just don't see a lot here.
I'll keep the Michigan State passing attack quick. They are very sensitive to game script. So for whatever reason, Rutgers went up in this game. Michigan State will not hesitate to throw, and they have 2 alphas on the outside, and Jalen Naylor, Jaden Reed. One thing I will say about Rutgers is they play fast. They're averaging 75 plays per game. So if this gets into a little bit of a back and forth affair, maybe you could look to that game script. I don't love it, but Reed and Naylor, super concentrated target share between the 2.
Well, the next game you're going to have a lot to say about because it's one of the best. Virginia, who can't stop anybody. 2.5 point dogs going to Louisville. Cunningham, explosive dual threat. We've seen him a lot this year. You've got 2 big time quarterbacks. You've got Armstrong, you've got Cunningham. Let's take this game kind of, in a cumulative fashion. Where do you rank them against each other, and how do they fall amongst all the signal callers on this slate?
They're fantastic plays. And right now they're projected, both of them in the top 3. I think you want to play at least one in cash. You want to consider both. And Armstrong, we'll start with him. He just has so much volume. He's a great dual threat. Last year he was over 500 rushing yards. So he hasn't shown that as much this year, but he has taken 17 sacks. So it does mitigate some of that ability a little bit. But Armstrong does have great mobility. And then he's averaging 44.5 pass attempts per game, 391 yards. Louisville's defense has been brutal in all facets, as has Virginia's. That's why you see the total here at 70. But Armstrong, volume's on his side, efficiency's been on his side, super easy to stack. Up at the top, you can play Dontavian Wicks, their big play threat. You can play their underneath reliable receiver in Billy Kemp. You can play some cheaper options in Keats and Thompson. does not seem to be affected whatsoever by that cast on his hand. Had 9 targets last week, 3 carries. Like, he's just super involved as a gadget player. So he's a great floor option at 4,600. And then Rashawn Henry, 3,300. The dude is still averaging 7.3 targets per game in his last 4 games. Where can you get that volume at 3,300? I just don't think you possibly can. So he's a phenomenal option as just a cheap price adjusted play near the bottom if you need salary relief. Jelani Woods, their tight end. It appears he'll be out again, but watch his status pregame. He was in a boot last week. You don't recover from those things that quickly, but someone to watch.
This team, they've run so many plays and they throw the ball almost 2/3 of the time. It's just ridiculous. Absolutely love it. And for all of this, I do want to say, if you guys aren't familiar, and by this time, I hope you would be, all this information, all these projections, all these data sheets, they are all live on Awesemo homepage, the college football page, part of our college football package. Matt powers it. No better time to sign up. We've got weekly, we've got monthly. If you want to sign up for the rest of the year, you can do that as well. And Matt has been doing extra work and doing the alternative slates, whether it's the night slates and some of those. We've been putting them in front of the paywall at times to give you guys a sneak peek, but there's just so much information there. The last thing I want to ask you about Virginia, I'm probably butchering this, Tulapalapa or whatever his name is. I like him as a player. He didn't play 2 weeks ago. He returned last week. Is he going to dominate the backfield touches, or is Hollins in there? Who else really could garner some rushing upside?
They're going to use a timeshare. It's going to be Tulapapa and Hollins 50-50 split. They don't run barely ever. And when they need to be up in games for them to embrace that. Neither of them is averaging more than 32 yards per game. Pass for me.
On the other side, you already mentioned Malik Cunningham, just fantastic. Dual threat ability through the roof. You've got Mitchell. You've got some pass catchers. Just Louisville, they should be able to score with UVA. So where do you rank these guys, and how do you construct your Louisville stacks?
Cunningham's right there in terms of price adjusted projection. He's averaging 261 pass yards per game on 32.5 attempts. It's extreme efficiency. 309 yards on the ground, scrambling, designed runs. He's literally doing it all. You can play Cunningham with confidence.
How primed are you in tournaments to maybe use Cunningham by himself?
You absolutely can do that. Not opposed to stacking him, though. They had Braden Smith get hurt, narrowing the target distribution. Marshawn Ford has target counts of 9, 7, and 6 in 3 straight games. He's their tight end, but he is the team's leader in targets and receiving yards. And then behind him, the only other player with a full-time role in the offense is Jordan Watkins. He also has been fairly targeted in the last 3 games. I think those are the top 2 options, and I'm not messing around with anyone behind him. In the backfield, I think Jalen Mitchell's a great play today because of game environment. 36-point team total overall. Mitchell is still averaging 16.5 opportunities per game. That's targets plus carries. He hasn't seen fewer than 14 in any of the last 4 games. And it's a phenomenal game environment. Virginia allows over 220 yards on the ground. So Cunningham and Mitchell both exploit that. Not to mention Mitchell's price is just it's 4,600. Like, the guy is so cheap in such a good game environment against such a bad defense. Like, Mitchell's a phenomenal option.
Yeah, Virginia this year, they're next to UMass, so you know it's bad. They're 116th in rushing yards allowed per attempt, 5.5. That is just horrendous. When you use Mitchell, would you use Cunningham in those same lineups? Do you think you can do that? Is it optimal? Is it not optimal? How do you break that down?
So I'm playing cash today only because I can't late swap. I'm going to be traveling, unfortunately. So I can't play like a ton of lineups today. I can't play GPPs. I have Mitchell and Cunningham in my cash lineup. On DraftKings, on FanDuel, I have one of them.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, listen, this is one of the best game environments, both of these teams. If you have guys that are out there, you can really look to them. There's no doubt about it.
Just weddings in the fall, man. Unbelievable.
What are you anticipating the food's going to be like at this thing?
I don't know. I'm very picky.
You expecting like good art, or are you going to try to be a hero on hors d'oeuvres, or are you going to wait for the meal? Like mini hot dogs? I'm
going to my parents' house beforehand, and my dad.
Oh, eat there?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a rookie mistake, but I respect that.
Dude,
I respect it.
The Gajeski household on College Football Saturday is just pure live betting, cookout, good food, beer if you want it. It's just truly the best for football fans.
I gotta take a trip. This sounds not bad. I'm not gonna lie.
You've been to Appleton? Open invite.
I've been to Appleton. No, that I have not been to Appleton, but I
thought you had.
No, I've been to Vegas. That's the closest I've been to Wisconsin. Haven't been in the Midwest. That's neither here nor there. We're going to keep it moving. Couple games left, then we'll get to some questions. I'll ask you more about the wedding. We've got Georgia, 15-point favorite, going to Jordan Hare to try to take another step towards just marching to the playoff. They take on Auburn, 46-point total. Georgia's given up 23 points on the year. This team is just ridiculous right now. They're killing everybody. But for DFS, they're really not a great team because it's impossible to get into shootouts with them. Do we even care who's under QB? That's what I ask you every week with them. What is there to say about this Bulldogs offense?
I don't think you're playing a lot of Georgia. It kind of sucks. They have a nice total at 30.5, but it's just Stetson Bennett is more of a game manager than JT Daniels. He's somewhat mobile, but the volume's just so low for him. There isn't really a ceiling. And when they're playing with the lead, they're just going to use the run. And when they do that, it's split between 4 players too. So it's as much of a dart throw as you could possibly imagine. Like you're just playing the straight lottery guessing between Zamir White, Kendall Milton, James Cook, and Kenny McIntosh. And then we haven't even factored in price. Like Zamir White for 6K is just a laughable price.
Anything on the outside? I mean, obviously they get up, they smother you, then they just run the ball. Is there anything we could talk about in the passing game?
Brock Bowers is way up in price. He's their wide receiver 1, even though he plays tight end, but you just can't play him for that price. Like he's 100 cheaper than Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, it's tough. Even on prize picks, I don't like sometimes these really get low. I don't think you want to mess around with Georgia too much. They're just such an imposing defense. But I am actually a little interested to see because last week, Bo Nix was the most it was Johnny Manziel-esque. He couldn't be tackled by LSU. They had so many chances at him, and he single-handedly, in a lot of ways, won that game for Auburn in Baton Rouge at night. Now he's at home, but barring you being concussed, there's no possible way that you would ever consider playing him, right?
Yeah, even in that game against LSU, he was fine on the ground, but he still wasn't very good as a passer. He only completed 60% of his passes. Really low upside to begin with, and then we factor in Georgia's defense. I'm just not playing anyone on Auburn today. Their implied team total is 16.
So is there anything in the backfield, any pass catchers?
No, I don't think so. Tank Bigsby's been rumored to be banged up as well. That's certainly not good. And their coaches denied this to a degree, but I think the carries show it. 9 carries for him, 6 carries for Jarquez Hunter. In the receiving room, I just don't think you want to target anybody against Georgia's stifling defense, particularly when we have good options for value plays. Like you're not taking Demetrius Robertson at 4,700 or Shedrick Jackson. They're both more expensive than Raheem Jarrett. Kobe Hudson's more expensive than Jayshon Jones. Just pass.
Agree. I mean, he's getting some targets relative to a $3,600 price tag, but Maryland, their total says it all. Yeah, they're going to get blown out, but they're expected to score certainly more than an extra touchdown than when you look at the implied totals over Auburn. So I don't see anything. I'm not betting this game. I don't know how you back Auburn, and I certainly don't want to lay 15 on the road with a team that doesn't score a lot.
I took Georgia at 14.5.
Fair enough. I mean, they just like I said, every time I look, it's 21-0 in the first quarter. They've gone to the Bama playbook. So we will see with that one. Let's keep it moving. We got 4 games left. Boise State, BYU. It's a weird game to be on the slate. 6.5-point spread. BYU is at home. They've been very impressive. I've been wrong about them. I thought that teams like Arizona State and a couple others would really cause problems for them. And credit to BYU, they've gotten it done. 57.5-point total. Let's start with the road team and the Broncos here. Halani, what's the status of him? Where's Bachmeier rank? He's kind of in no man's land. What's there to say about Boise State?
Yeah, Bachmeier, I think he's a worse play than like KJ Jefferson. It comes down to mobility. He's just more mobile. Jefferson, that is. Bachmeier, I think, is live in tournaments because of pure volume. They're passing the ball 53.5% of the time. They're up tempo, 74 plays per game. He's averaging over 300 pass yards per game, but he needs that in order to make up the sacks he's going to take. Bachmeier is easy to stack. Khalil Shakir, his volume's been down a little bit, but that's also dropped his price. So more than comfortable with him. Stephen Cobb's returned from injury. He's the clear wide receiver 2. Octavius Evans is kind of a seldom used wide receiver 3. In the backfield, you hinted to George Halani's injury. They've held him out. It's the same injury he had early in the year, which has been undisclosed. We don't know what it is, but he allegedly aggravated it, which I don't think bodes well for his status. And across the industry, it's pretty widely regarded that he's going to miss this game. Just watch his status. One thing I want to say about Cyrus Habibi-Lokoyo, he projected really well as a price-adjusted play. A lot of optimals I was running early this morning gave me Jalen Mitchell for Louisville and Habibi-Lokoyo. I think he's very fragile. He's going to split time with Andrew Van Buren, and a lot of his volume and projection is reliant on his target share, which has been really good this year. It's at 9%. And that's not something he's shown in the past. So I think you have to determine whether that's a fluke or not. And now that we have Henry Parish at the exact same price point with late news driving Parish, I'm making that pivot in almost all lineups to a much better game environment.
On the other side, last time we saw BYU, I believe it was on a short slate, either Thursday or Friday, and Hall, their quarterback, was held out. It looks like he's good to go here. Is that what you're seeing? And then what does that do to this offense, to Algier in the backfield? How does BYU operate if Hall is in fact under center?
Yeah, it looks like he will be. And Baylor Romney got hurt in their last game. So I think they're going to, Hall almost played last week. He should be good to go here. He's a good dual threat quarterback. He just doesn't have a ton of upside as a passer, averaging 187 yards per game. Poor efficiency for him, just 28 attempts. And he's mobile, which is the best thing we can say about him. But he's not mobile in the sense like Malik Cunningham is. I don't know if his ceiling is there as a rusher, which makes him pretty tough to play at his price at 8,100. He is in no man's land where I would rather just pay all the way up or all the way down. The one thing that you can say, the matchup here against Boise State's run defense is very good. Boise allowing 194 yards per game to opposing FBS teams.
Any feel for how the game kind of goes? It just feels like BYU once again probably going to get it done at home, but total feels about right. I don't see anything like that's wildly variant in this one.
Yeah, Boise is a really, really bad defense. So if I was looking to something, it would be the over in the game, which I bet already.
There you go. How do you need a spreadsheet? The bets keep piling up. You got a big card this week, don't you?
Yeah, I'll count them. It's a lot.
Yeah, Boise State, man. There's some weird games, like a weird game against Oklahoma State. They've lost to Nevada.
So I just I catch these so early in the week. Like this was very clearly going to go up. I caught it at 55. It's at like 58 now. So it's like when I run my model and I see these big price discrepancies, it's just like hard for me not to end up with like 15 to 20 bets.
No, listen, if you're beating the lines, you're beating the lines. And I do want to say, well, win some, you lose some. What can I say? I'm with you. Listen, I bet a lot of games. And that's why, again, I'm just going to give a quick shout out to Betting You. Me and Matt, every Wednesday we record and we get a lot of lines that by the time we do this show, they're long gone. And more often than not, truly, we are capturing some value. So if you're looking to bet, definitely give that a listen. No reason. It's a fun time. Really casual, good stuff. We've got 3 games left. I also want to give this shout out. MMA is coming up. We got Live Before Lock right after this show. Jason Floyd, Pete the Heat, breaking down all the fights. If you're going to make some money afternoon with the Octagon, stay tuned for that show. But let's get to Wake Forest and Syracuse. I want to talk about Tucker versus Algier. That was a question from Slim in chat. We've got Wake 6-point favorite on the road, 58.5 point total. Can the Demon Deacons keep it alive and keep it rolling here?
I think they can. I think the total is plummeted to some degree in this game because of the new approach Syracuse is taking to games. With their quarterback switch over to Garrett Schrader, they're just extremely slow, extremely passive. You think of them, I almost want to compare it to like a Kansas State style offense where it's going to be like that. Now, that's good for Garrett Schrader. I think it's bad for the overall game environment. But on the Syracuse side, Tucker is a fantastic play. He has so much volume. The concern is overall play volume, and they're expected to trail in this game. Tucker is involved as a pass catcher. He has 11 targets on the year. I have a slight preference towards Algier for just that direct comparison, Tucker to Algier overall, because of the implied team total for BYU is just so much higher, nearly 7 points, 8 points higher than Syracuse overall. So it'll still be Algier for me, but I think Tucker has higher owned in GPPs and cash gains. So, I mean, it's a balancing act. You just want to eat Tucker's ownership and try to get different somewhere else. But I don't know. That's a really tough decision for me. And then what was your question with Wake Forest?
Just in general, I mean, they're a team that's been able to keep going. They run a ton of plays every game. You've got Hartman. Where does a guy like Roberson fill in, into the pegging order 6,400? The backfield to me looks like a pretty even timeshare. I don't think you want to go there, but what do you see from this team who's been really impressive so far?
Yeah, they're really fast, which is it clashes directly with Syracuse. So I think you see the plays per game somewhere in the middle, just moderate volume. And that's kind of reflected in the total 58.5 here. Wake Forest is super sensitive to game script, and they're a team that will hammer the run when they're ahead. When they're in competitive games, they will increase their pass rate. Like their pass rate on the year, 42%. Last week in a competitive game jumped all the way up to 49%. So big jumps that was reflected in Jacare Roberson's statistics. He had 11 targets. He will have big games like that. It's just they're favored by 5.5 here against Syracuse, which indicates this could be more of a run heavy script. At 6,400, I'm just trying to find the extra salary to play players like Garrett Wilson, and instead of like A.T. Perry, Taylor Moore, and just going down a little cheaper and playing like the Virginia guys, the Louisville guys, players like that.
On the other side, you talked about Tucker, your boy, Garrett Schrader. Where does he fall in? Is he a viable kind of, against like Tagovailoa? Is it Schrader or is it Tagovailoa?
Playing Schrader in your lineup is basically playing a glorified running back. His volume is coming mostly on the ground. I'm just never going to play guys like this. It comes down to like in these slow offenses, they have to really hit a ceiling efficiency to get there. And Schrader's not even cheap. He's 6,700. So as much as I love him, he's like a fancy running back. You just can't play him in your super flex with the way he's used.
And to that point, does that mean we really can't play any Syracuse pass catchers?
I don't think so. Like as soon as they named Schrader the starter, Taj Harris promptly transferred out of the program.
Left. He said,
"I'm like, nah, man, my volume's gone. I'm gonna get this somewhere else." Queeley, Courtney Jackson, Sherrod Johnson, they're all cheap, but Queeley, their wide receiver one, still look more expensive than Jarrett. Courtney Jackson still expensive than Jayshon Jones. It's just opportunity cost.
All right. Well, we got 2 games left, but really, if you combine their totals, it would be around the Maryland-Ohio State game, just to show you where we're at. We got Wisconsin. They're 11-point favorites going into Illinois, but it's only a 42-point total. Go ahead. Talk about your guys here. I don't see a lot.
Just don't play anyone in this game. If you are playing anyone, you could take a shot on the Wisconsin backfield, but they turned it into a timeshare. Ches Malusi, 6 carries. Jalen Berger, 8 carries. Freshman Braylon Allen, 5 carries. Braylon Allen is an enormous back, and he's super athletic. So the coaching staff was talking about getting him more involved. He's 3K flat. You don't need to go there, but if you are playing one, taking a shot on him in enormous GPPs, go for it if you want, but I'm not doing it. Illinois, just don't play anyone.
They get the Bowling Green treatment.
Yeah, they do. Like Arthur Sikowski, Brandon Peters. Peters is going to start, but he's not even completing 50% of his passes.
Nothing in the backfield. Chase Brown, 26 carry style.
They've been like the most inconsistent team in the world. Just the game prior, Josh McCrary had 24 carries. Like it's a revolving door at running back. I have no idea who's going to see all the work. Chase Brown's your best bet, but he's 6,900.
And just for reference, I watched Charlotte yesterday. Their run defense is slightly different than Wisconsin's, who's allowing 1.6 yards per rush. Don't do that. Don't chase those points. This is a complete wash. I'm not betting it. I don't care about this game. They should sell off the proceeds and give it to charity of all these teams. I have no interest in this. Are you betting it?
No.
Okay. Let's keep it moving. Let's get to this last game. We'll get to some questions. Penn State, Iowa, one of the biggest games on the slate, playoff implications. Obviously, it's a horrible total, and it may not impact your lineups, but it's still worth talking about. Penn State's a slight dog going into Iowa, wherever they are. I think it's in Iowa City. But anyway, talk to me about Sean Clifford. Talk to me about Dotson. This is a incredibly strong defense that they're going to be facing. Does that make them tournament viable, or is that just too much risk, not enough reward?
Best real-life game of the day, worst DFS game on the main slate. 19.5-point total for Penn State, not worth getting to at these prices. Clifford does have upside as a dual threat, but Iowa's defense has been good. They're going to play slow. They're going to play run heavy. They're just going to sap the DFS goodness out of this game. If you stack Clifford and Dotson, you're dedicating an enormous part of your salary to a team with a 19.5-point total. So it's they're fantastic players. This game environment just leaves so much to be desired that it's impossible to get to. They project so poorly.
Anything from Ira? Obviously, we're not playing Petrus. Goodson seems there's better guys out there. Laporta, anything?
It's that exactly. Goodson gets the volume to consider for tournaments. It's like Letty Brown, but there's just so many better options in that range where I don't think you need to be that crazy. Just looking at the top of the salary for running back. There's Trevion Henderson at 7,500. There's Algier at 78. There's Tucker at 72. You go down a little bit in price, and there's players that you can also play like Letty. There's so many players that you could get to rather than Goodson in a terrible game environment that I probably just won't do it.
All right, couple questions here. Hit that like button. Drop some questions in chat if you want. Quick summary, if you have it, Matt, on the Texas Tech running backs. I know they're not on the slate. Have you looked at that at all? We got a couple questions from FanDuel, some favorite bets of ours. We'll get to all of that.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be a timeshare. I was sad they didn't give Sir Roderick all of the work in the last game, but that's kind of how I view it.
My favorite bets, I like Oklahoma. I like Ohio State. I like Kentucky at night. I like Kent State. I do want to say, and people are going to say, what the hell is this guy talking about? In the FCS world, the Presbyterian over-under is 91. If you haven't seen that team, you should research them. I'm still going over. I think the game probably is played in the 60s. It's just ridiculous. They don't punt and they onside kick every time. Wanted to put that in the show. Anyway, any bets that stand out for you?
On the same ones you are. My different bets. So I have the over in Boise BYU. I have the over in SMU Navy. I also have Kentucky. Penn State, I got it +3. So happy with that number. Took some MAC games. I have Kent State. I have Eastern Michigan, Central Michigan, USC -3 in a buy low spot. I've got a ton of stuff on that.
That's a good one. Mechie, who we haven't talked about, obviously, because not on the slate, but for FanDuel, or Raheem Jarrett, who's a little more priced up over there. They're the same price.
Jarrett.
Stroud and Tucker, or Armstrong and Travion Henderson for cash?
Armstrong Henderson.
Yes, I agree. What do we got here? Best FanDuel value wide receivers. I don't know if you have that handy.
I do. FanDuel value wide receivers. It's tough. I think Keaton Thompson, very, very cheaply priced there, 6,500. Trey Turner for Virginia Tech at 64. Like Jackson Smith and Jigba, 69. Those are some of the names I would look at.
Thoughts on Dotson? We talked about this. It's just for the price, for the game environment, it's not worth it.
100%.
Mitchell or Parish if you only had to play one?
Mitchell.
Thoughts on the wide receiver, Romney?
He's decent in tournaments, but they're really run heavy. I think it's just an opportunity cost play. Would rather get to someone else, but if you're stacking that game, he's fine.
Do you know both of these people getting married or just one of them?
I know one of them. I've never met the woman, but the dude is my very good friend from high school.
Okay, so you'll be at a table with a lot of people you know?
I think so.
Okay. If you're at a table with nobody that you know and people ask what you do, what are you going to say?
Day laborer.
Accountant is the answer. I've told you this 1,000 times. That was a test and you failed. But what are we going to do? All right, last question. Armstrong, Smalls, Mitchell, or Tagovailoa, Parish, and Wilson?
Armstrong, Smalls, Mitchell for me, but I would try to look at someone other than Smalls if possible.
Yes, I agree. Got to keep an eye on that. All right. We have done some real good work here, my friends. As always, I want to give a quick shout out to Prize Picks. If you haven't signed up over there, promo code Awesemo, no better time to do it. And a special thanks to Matt each and every week for preparing the projections, all that information on our site that we use to power this show. It is such an impressive thing with all these teams. So get on over there, sign up and join the team. We cannot wait to have you as part of it. For me, for Matt, for Awesemo, good luck, everyone. Stay tuned for the MMA show coming up next, and we'll see you guys next week.